There are other areas of research, and I come from outside the diabetes space. There's other areas of research that overlap with the types of pathways and areas of which we work in. For example, in the autoimmune area and immunology, we should be stepping out of our comfort zone and looking for other disease areas that have similar types of pathological differences that we can tap their research and work with them to help us find a cure. So these are what I believe JDRF's research department's roles and responsibilities are, and we're going to be holding to all of these. So it's no longer just about gap filling. We're going to do all of these as we actually fill this portfolio. We are going to work in cure, treat, and prevent. I'm going to show you in a few minutes what the FY12 looks like as far as percentage of where we're going to be spending that portfolio. I'm going to actually show you the map, and then I'll talk a little bit about each of these under each area. So under cure, it's going to be about targeted vaccines. Regrowing beta cells, I'm sure you've heard a lot about that. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this encapsulation because we're going to put some strength behind that. I'll talk to you a little bit about biomarkers, and I'm going to come back to that. And of course, we still don't know enough, so we need to still understand and fund in basic research to understand more about the disease. On the treat side, you're all very familiar about the artificial pancreas. I think that we've been out promoting that since 2006, and I'm going to talk a little bit about where we are with that. We have a new initiative, the glucose responsive insulin. We have a new strategy coming forward for that. That's exciting, but it's way off. Glucose modulating drugs. We are actively looking for any new agents that are out there that may actually help in modulating glucose levels. We call that repositioning. Diabetic eye disease in the complications area is a strategic program now, and prevention of complications is also a strategic area. And in collaboration with a new Canadian trial network that just is going to launch on the 20th, we will be launching a very large pregnancy trial. Very important to learn more about what's going on in the pregnancy arena. So that is part of the treat portfolio now. On the prevention side, it's going to be about vaccines. I'm going to talk to you about what we call the microbiome just a little bit in a few minutes. We need to understand staging of the disease, so we will be actually funding on how the disease progresses. What forces it to progress? What can we do to arrest progression? We'll be working there. I talked to you about biomarkers, and then, of course, we need to invest in clinical trials that will test prevention concepts. So we're a long way off on the prevention, so we've got to get going if we're going to work in that arena. You've probably seen this before. This is a very common type 1 diabetes stage progression graph. It's used in the type 1 space, so I want to put it back up here again. Just to give you a sense, as the disease is staged, where it is, this research is located. So of course, this graph, what it's actually showing you is, as the disease progresses across the bottom, and then across the top is the actual cells of the pancreas. And what happens to them as the disease progresses. So on the prevention side, we're going to have to get in there before the disease progresses. And probably just when genetic at risk is identified, this is where you're going to have to do your intervention. And then as you start to stage through this, the second part is to stop the autoimmunity attack. So we'll be working in that arena on the prevention side. And then, of course, the real goal is to actually save those cells that are going to be committed to death. That's what you're going to be doing in prevention. On the treat side, improve glucose control. That's what it's going to be about. So that's where we're going to be working in the research area, is to look at those, trying to develop therapeutics or devices that can help us do that. Also, that's connected as a dotted line to prevention of complications. And then, of course, the cure is all about the recent onset, the established, and of course, not worrying about complications. So you're going to see this picture over and over and over again. We've been using it in all our talks. So if you haven't seen it, I want to introduce it tonight. So what are we doing in FY12? So we have now posted, last Friday, we launched our FY12 initiatives. They are now on our website, so you can go there and see. This is exactly what this is going to look like in the upcoming year and the percentages that we will be placing on these portfolios, approximately. We have to have a little flexibility on the pipeline, but as you can see on the right-hand side on the prevent, I've just brought on a new scientist to put the strategic plan together, where 10% of our funding will be going in the prevention area. I want to make a note about that. You might not think that's enough, and I've heard that it's not enough for grandparents that call me and say, I don't want to see my grandchild develop this disease. We've got to prevent it. You might think 10% is not good enough. Actually, prevention goes across our portfolio. So although I'm only going to put 10% of our funding in that bucket, actually it taps into the treat portfolio as well. So I wanted to make that disclaimer. In the treat arena, artificial pancreas, glucose modulating agents, diabetic eye disease, and prevention of complications, they'll take about 35% of the funding allocations. The cure will maintain around 35 to 45%. These are all the areas of which we're trying to accelerate to the cure. So that's beta cell regeneration, health, and survival. We made a very big push last year in that arena, funded very heavily in that arena. So research takes time. We put extra money in that bucket last year, so we've not put as much there this year because we want to see if some of that research that we seeded last year actually starts to show progress for us. Obviously, we're working in immune therapies and antigen-specific immune therapies, which includes vaccines. And then the encapsulation, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that so you can understand what we mean when we talk about encapsulation. We are still going to maintain our training at between 8 and 10% of the portfolio. And what I mean by training is this is where we invest in new diabetologists, new researchers. So we actually fund almost 10% of our portfolio to train new scientists, new physicians, new researchers that will stay in the type 1 space. If you don't train them, they won't be there. And if you want to accelerate research, you've got to train people that are going to work in the arena. So we will maintain the budget at 10% in the training arena. And you'll notice there's a new bucket. It's called accelerators. This is where the biomarker strategy is going to be housed this year. It runs across the portfolio. So we will be making a run there, and we'll also be partnering with NIH in trying to put together a biomarker initiative, and I'll talk to you about what is a biomarker and why we need them. So you'll see on our website, this is exactly what it looks like up there. These are what we call our FY12 initiatives or areas of emphasis. In the primary prevention area, we're starting to fund in a very new area called the microbiome. And what I did with each of these priority areas, I'm going to give you an example so that you can understand what it is we're doing in the research funding there, and I'm going to talk about the microbiome. Secondary prevention is really about staging and biomarkers and also genetic resistance. You know, why do some people advance and progress and get type 1 diabetes? Why do some not? It's very important to know that. That's how you understand how you can end up preventing in the end. So we'll be working there. And then, of course, funding prevention clinical trials. So the microbiome, I want to introduce this to you. And this is new. We will be funding this year in this arena. We started funding last year in this arena. I think we funded 5 or 6 grants in this area. This is the concept that something happens. So when we talk about the microbiome in this context, we're talking about all the microorganisms that exist in your intestinal tract, or we call it gut flora. And believe it or not, there is like 1,000 different microorganisms that exist in your intestinal tract. And there is research out there that says what commits somebody to type 1 diabetes, which really sends